I saw an article yesterday that said that the Detroit Pistons are on the come up this year, while the Sacramento Kings will suddenly decline. I disagree with one of those points, and I'm here to talk about why. Cavs, Kings, and Pistons fans, y'all better buckle up for this one. Give me my theme music. And now, ladies and gentlemen, in the place to be, it is that time for the post-game reaction podcast to the Cleveland Cavaliers, Sacramento Kings, and the Pistons from the D. This is Let 'Em Know Kings in the 3-1-3. What's going on, Cavs, Kings, and Pistons fans, and welcome to another edition of Let 'Em Know Kings in the 3-1-3, the postgame podcast to the Cleveland Cavaliers, Detroit Pistons, and the Sacramento Kings. I'm your host, Skylar Weisberg. Thank you for tuning in, and as a reminder, you can find Let 'Em Know Kings in the 3-1-3 on Amazon Music, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Pandora, and Spotify. You can also go to Anchor.fm/CLESK313, CLESK313. That is the Anchor.fm website for that. And you can download the Spotify for Podcasters app as well on your iTunes or Google Play stores. Give the show a follow on those platforms if you can, please. Turn on your notifications so you know about the next episode, which will probably be after the preseason, because I was debating if I was going to cover the preseason games for the Cavs, Kings, and Pistons, but I was like, maybe not, I don't know. So maybe I'll do episodes for like the preseason, maybe I won't. But in any event, please rate, spread the word out to your friends, and give Let 'Em Know Kings in the 3-1-3 a 5-star review. I saw an article the other day. A friend of mine sent this to me actually yesterday. A friend of mine sent me this yesterday about how she was talking about how one of our teams will be on the rise come this season, while the other will surprisingly decline. And I said, man, maybe I should make a podcast episode about it. Maybe I should make a podcast episode about it, because there's a lot for me to talk about when it comes to the Pistons and the Kings right now. They didn't mention about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Again, disrespectful to Cleveland. I still think Cleveland will be another team that will be on the rise this year. The question is if we are going to improve come playoff time, because last year the Cleveland Cavaliers had 51 wins last year, and they got spanked, smoked, humiliated, and humbled by the New York Knicks in the playoffs. So my only thing that I'm going to say about the Cleveland Cavaliers is this: JB Bickerstaff, you better be a coach that gets on your players. That gets on your players and teaches them accountability. Because let me tell you something. If you don't show any accountability this year, Jordy Fernandez is going to get on the phone with Kobe Altman. For those of you that may not know, Jordy Fernandez is the current assistant coach of the Sacramento Kings. He's going to get on the phone and say, hey, Kobe Altman, please send me to Cleveland. I could show JB Bickerstaff what accountability is. I could show JB Bickerstaff how to be a coach, because if Cleveland does not go past the first round this year, we're going to have a problem. But it's not about the Cleveland Cavaliers this episode. It is about two of our three teams, the Detroit Pistons and the Sacramento Kings. While one team most likely to improve this year, there were actually a few. There were actually the Toronto Raptors, which, by the way, are the favorites of getting Damian Lillard, which I am surprised considering that the Miami Heat were big on getting Damian Lillard, Dame Dollar to 305. But let me tell you something. Pat Riley and his aggressive approach is going to cost the Miami Heat Dame freaking Dollar. But that's beside the point. The Indiana Pacers are another team to improve this year because they added a really good player, being in NBA champion Bruce Brown. Another team that is listed to improve is the Houston Rockets, which I disagree with. I disagree. I agree with the fact that Fran VanVleet is going to help the Houston Rockets as far as leadership goes, but with the addition of Dylan Brooks and the lack of maturity that this man has on the floor, I strongly believe that the Houston Rockets are going to go nowhere. The team that I have that will likely improve is the Detroit Pistons. Now, admittedly, the team with the worst record in the NBA to improve is a bit of a slam dunk. Of teams this century with fewer more than 20 wins, or the equivalent in seasons shorter than 82 games, 87.5% have won a higher percentage the following season. Yet still, the underlying results suggest Detroit wasn't actually the league's weakest squad in 2022-23. Portending bigger improvement than usual for a team that landed the 5th overall pick in the NBA draft, Ausar Thompson, for its trouble. The Pistons were outscored by just 8 points per game, a poor mark, but far better than the San Antonio Spurs that were minus 10 points per game, who went with 22 and 60. Typically, we expect a team with Detroit's points scored and allowed to finish with 21 wins instead of 17, but I don't predict the NBA and I don't predict the record of the NBA. But in any event, the Pistons also had some very big injury problems. More specifically, they were dealing with the injury bug this year. They had 295 games lost to non-COVID related illnesses or injury. They were the second most in the league behind the Portland Trail Blazers with 330. And that's before we even consider the fact that 72 of those games came from the number 1 overall pick in 2021, Cade Cunningham, who missed the majority of last season due to injury. A healthy Cade Cunningham and better luck converting points into wins should produce improvement despite a relatively quiet offseason for the 3-1-3. Yes, they got Joe Harris, who's a genuine shooter who can shoot the 3 from three-point range all over the darn building. And yes, they got Monty Williams, who's a more qualified coach than Dwayne Casey ever was. That being said, as far as improving for Detroit, I see that. I see improvement for Detroit this year. Will they make the playoffs? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I do not see the Detroit Pistons making the playoffs this year because you have teams that are slightly better or completely better than Detroit. You got your Bostons, you got your Philadelphia 76ers in there, you got the Miami Heat in there, you got the New York Knicks in there. Hell, you got the Cleveland Cavaliers in there for all I care. I can see them maybe making the play-in, but that's definitely a stretch. It's going to come down to a few factors. First of all, will Cade Cunningham stay healthy for most of the season? I believe if Cade Cunningham stays healthy and stays away from the sidelines, and he will help a core that will probably be on the rise this year with Jaden Ivey, who is an absolute stud, Jalen Duren, who is an absolute stud, and by the way, JJ Redick predicted a breakout season for Jalen Duren, which I believe. And then you got Ausar Thompson, who's the number 5 overall pick. I think Detroit is going to go places this year because Monty Williams is going to bring a culture and a standard to Detroit. But I don't know if the Pistons are going to be good enough, at least not yet, to make a playoff caliber team. I could see them in the play-in, but maybe not the playoffs this year. But they will improve, though. Their record will improve from 17 and 65 a year ago. But I can tell that also because of how good Monty Williams as a head coach is. As for the Sacramento Kings, a team that will be on the decline, for those that said that Sacramento will be on the decline, have you lost your mind? Huh? Have you lost your mind? Have you? I mean, nobody predicted was owed good fortune more than the Kings, who snapped their 16-year playoff drought with home court advantage thanks in part to a losing league low 55 games due to injury or COVID illness. Everybody was healthy for the Sacramento Kings for the most part. In the 15 seasons they tracked injuries, Sacramento's games lost relative to a league average, with the 7th lowest of any team in that span. Just one of the 6 teams ahead of the Sacramento Kings posted a better winning percentage the following season. The news isn't all bad for Sacramento, which could benefit from weaker opponent three-point shooting this season after the Kings' foes hit 37% of the league's 6th highest mark, with a young core of De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Domantas Sabonis, and Keegan Murray. I cannot also forget the new guy, Sasha Vezenkov. Sacramento could be able to stave off a significant decline. Still repeating last year's win total will be a challenge. I agree with the fact that, repeating the win challenge for the Sacramento Kings will be a stretch because they're bringing almost everybody back. Well, they got JaVale McGee as a center, a depth piece in the center position, but they also got the Europe MVP, Sasha Vezenkov, which I am really looking forward to seeing in Sacramento. The thing that questions me about Sacramento is I want to see how they can improve on the defensive side of the ball. Now, offensively, I got nothing to worry about this Sacramento Kings team. They were leading the NBA in scoring with the best offense that I've seen in the NBA in quite some time. So as far as offense goes, Sacramento, you got nothing to worry about. Especially the fact that you got Keegan Murray, who could be a sniper from three-point range. I need to see him improve his scoring a little bit. And Mr. Fourth Quarter, De'Aaron Fox. You know, De'Aaron Fox calls game against the Orlando Magic last year. I think Mr. Fourth Quarter will rise again. The question is, who's going to step up if De'Aaron Fox sits in the bench in the fourth quarter? Or if, God forbid, De'Aaron Fox is out for any specific moment in time due to injury. I can trust Kevin Huerter, but his three-point shooting is a little on and off. I could trust Keegan Murray, but I need to see him as a scorer. I could maybe trust Domantas Sabonis, but sometimes he gets bullied inside. Maybe JaVale McGee could help as far as size, but for me, it's the defensive side of the football, defensive side of the basketball for me, for the Sacramento Kings. Why am I thinking football in a basketball podcast? But that's beside the point. I haven't been recording, let them know Kings in the 3-1-3 for quite some time. So you got to forgive me for a little bit of rust. You got to forgive me for a little bit of rust when it comes to this show. But the point is, defensively, Sacramento was a little weak last year. A little weak last year on this side of the ball. But one stat that I heard, according to Locked On Kings, with my man Matt George, which, by the way, is a awesome podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, so check that out if you haven't done so already. The one stat to me that I found interesting was Sacramento was the number 1 team in the league in transition defense, meaning they were the best team in the NBA to stop fast breaks. Not Cleveland. I know everybody thought that Cleveland was the number 1 defense in the NBA, but you gotta remember, Cleveland was the number 1 scoring defense in the NBA. There is a difference between a scoring defense and a transition defense. Sacramento was the number 1 team in the NBA in transition defense last year, while Cleveland was number 1 in scoring defense last year, which I expect the matchup between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Sacramento Kings to be a dynamite matchup and a dynamite season series this year for both teams. And I expect both Cleveland and Sacramento to make the playoffs this year. The question is, can Sacramento improve on the defensive side of the ball? And under the second year, under Mike Brown and his system, will the Kings adjust? Will the Kings adapt to the defensive side of the basketball? If they do, they might eclipse their win total this year, if not more wins. If they don't, they will decline. They will decline this year. Not steep now, but they will decline to a point that maybe the Sacramento Kings will see themselves as a 5th seed, not the 3rd seed as they were last year. But again, it's too early for me to predict these things. We're going to see how the season will play out for Sacramento, but I do not see Sacramento on the decline. I can see them stationary to where they are, or they will slightly decline this year. It all depends on the defensive side of the basketball. Can Sacramento improve from there? That's going to do it for today's edition of Let 'Em Know Kings in the 313. You can find this show on Amazon Music, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Pandora, Spotify, and Anchor.fm/CLESK313. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app under iTunes and Google Play stores. Give the show a follow on those platforms. Turn on your notifications so you know about the next episode. Please rate, spread the word out to your friends, and give Let 'Em Know Kings in the 313 a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Skylar Weisberg, and I will see you soon for another episode of Let 'Em Know Kings in the 313. NBA season is fast approaching, and you can expect more Kings, Cavs, and Pistons coverage right here on Let 'Em Know Kings in the 313.